Okay, so now moving on to the Functional Thoughts and Actions Plan, which is on page 121. This is the form that you'll use, the process that you'll use to help clients go from identifying the thoughts that are leading to distress to modifying those thoughts and then creating new behaviors that go with those new thoughts. And so there on page 121, you see the first part of the form is just the part that you've already become familiar with, which is where you have the client identify the thought, attitude, belief, or opinion that is either not true or is causing problems in my life. What are the emotions, the emotional automatic response that go with this thought, attitude, belief, or opinion? Note that it doesn't say that the thought comes before or after the activating event. It's just you want, any thought, belief, attitude, or opinion that supports this emotional and behavioral distress response is going to be fruitful to work with. So there's that. And then what behaviors do I do or did I do when thinking this way? And again, I haven't put physiological responses down on here because I don't want to bog you down with one more thing to worry about. But physiological response is a part of the automatic responses, and if you want to make note of that, you certainly can. All right, so now we've identified the thought that we're working with, and now it's time to ask your clients a bunch of questions. So what I usually say to a client is, okay, I'm going to ask you a series of questions about this thought, and then you just answer me as honestly as you can. And again, always maintaining core conditions, always proper IVing them through the form. It shouldn't be a cold clinical conversation. Or a cold clinical exercise. It should be a conversation, a warm, empathetic conversation. So you can throw a reflection in, you can throw some validation in, you can throw a process comment in. It should just flow. Okay, so first question here is, how will this thought or belief help me to attain my goals in life? Simple answer could be it won't, or they might go into more detail. But whatever they say, you want to write that down. How will this thought or belief help me to have healthy relationships? Again, the simple answer might be it won't. There can be ways in which, even if you're not really convinced of the logic, but sometimes clients will have an answer to this question. Don't argue with them about it. Just keep moving through the form. It'll all sort itself out. If they say something like, well, I get angry a lot. How will my anger help me to have healthy relationships? Well, it will protect me from being hurt in a relationship. Say, okay, yeah, fair enough. Write that down. And you can validate. It's like, yeah, okay, it's going to maybe protect you from unhealthy relationships. It'll probably isolate you from all your relationships, healthy ones included, but we don't need to go into that. Acknowledge whatever. People have adopted these control strategies, these behavioral strategies for a reason. There's some benefit to them. And so you just want to acknowledge whatever that, even if it's a minimal benefit or a flawed benefit, acknowledge it. It's okay. It's going to sort itself out as you go through the form. Next question is, how will this thought or belief help me to live out my faith or values? Again, this might be a simple answer. They might have an answer that's somewhat valid. Validate what you can. A good rule of thumb when it comes to validation, never validate the invalid. Okay, so if it's not valid at all, don't validate it just to try and be nice. If you're going to validate something, it should be sincere. Okay? Next one, what is the evidence that this thought or belief is true? Okay, now let's say that the thought is something like, nobody likes me. Okay? And then you say, all right, well, what's the evidence that that's true? And they say, well, my mom doesn't like me, my dad doesn't like me, my siblings don't like me, my workmates don't like me, I don't have any friends, and they may go on. And I've had situations like that where truly there's been a lot of people that haven't liked the client. And so get it all down, let them say everything. Like, don't be worried that they're going to that the exercise is going to be a fail and that they're just going to reinforce their belief. Next question is, what is the evidence that this thought or belief is not true? So like in the case of, nobody likes me, and they list all these people who don't like them. At the very least, you can say, well, I like you. So that's one person who likes you. So I guess it's not true that nobody likes you. And so you can write yourself down. And usually if you press people like, is there anybody who likes you? They can find a couple people who like them. And so, I know that's just an example, but however bad it is, there's always a glimmer of hope somewhere, and you just need to proper IV a little bit to find it. Okay, is there an alternative explanation? So like, here's all the people who, in the example of nobody likes me, evidence that it's true that nobody likes you, evidence that it's false that nobody likes you, and then is there an alternative explanation? Could be something like, I have a very unique personality and it's not for everyone, but some people like me. Okay, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. And I will say, I should have said this at the beginning, but this is a template, right? So not every question on here is going to perfectly fit every thought that a client has for you. So use the questions that seem to fit, that seem to work. If you come to a question and you just don't see how it applies, skip it. Don't try and make a square peg fit in a round hole. It gets awkward really quickly. So if you're not sure how a question applies, just move on. All right? Next one, what is the worst that can happen in the distressing situation? So, you really want to know, like, what is the absolute worst that can happen, even if it's death of self, death of a loved one. I guess that's, one of the worst things that could happen. But you really want to find out what is the worst, because the next question is, how can I cope well with that? So typically, when somebody has a fear, people try to reassure them, don't worry, that'll never happen, okay? And what that kind of does is it inadvertently reinforces the fear, as if it's so bad, it's so big, it's so overwhelming that you could never survive it, and so don't even think that it could possibly happen. It's a kind of defense mechanism. A better way to deal with it, and by better I mean more effective at getting rid of the fear, is to have the client imagine the worst and then have them imagine coping well with that. Usually people stop when it comes to, they imagine the worst that can happen, and then their imagination stops. They don't imagine what happens the next day and the day after that and the day after that. And so, for example, I've had people say, well, if I pass away, then I guess I'm going to heaven and I'll be reunited with the people that I've lost, and I guess I can be at peace with that. Or they'll say, well, if this person I love dies, then I know that they're going to heaven. Or if the person I love dies, then I guess I'll grieve, probably for a really long time, and eventually I'll find a way to go on because I have other people to live for and other things to live for. And so getting them to, in their imagination, go beyond the feared event, it doesn't mean that they look forward to passing away, or that somebody they love, that they would lose them. Of course, it's always going to be a horrible experience to have to go through. But it's also not the end of the world. There's a way to move beyond it and a way to make peace with it so that you can enjoy whatever time that you have left. Okay. What is the best that can happen in the distressing situation? So you want them to imagine, the best possible outcome. And then what is the most likely thing that will happen? So it's usually not going to be the worst, and it's usually not going to be the best, but what's the most likely? This next question is a good one. It seems to unlock a lot of things for a lot of people. If I had a friend in a similar situation, what would I tell them? We're often good at giving other people advice, but we're not great at giving ourselves advice. So having them imagine what they would tell a friend, talk about eliciting change talk. Like, the very advice that they're wanting to give their friend is usually the advice that they should take for themselves, and it's much better coming from them than it is coming from you. Okay, so if you can get them to answer this question, then that's often going to be pretty close to where they land when it comes to creating a new thought. What is the overall effect of continuing to believe or repeat this thought or belief? You know, usually people will say things like, I'm probably going to stay anxious, or I'm probably going to stay angry, or whatever it is. What would be the effect of me changing this thought or belief? It'll be something like, I could have more peace, my relationships might be better, I might be able to accomplish my goals, stuff like that. Should I change my way of thinking or not? Usually by this time, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Like people say, yeah, I probably should. Okay. So then in the next section, it says, based on the above, what is a new way of thinking or believing that helps me to deal with this situation more effectively and or be the person I want to be? So this is where they create their new thoughts. So in the last section, you can think of all those questions as sort of a data gathering exercise. And now they're going to draw from all of that data to craft a new thought, a more adaptive thought, a more functional thought, because it gets them where they want to go, helps them reflect, to live out their values, to live out their beliefs, and to attain their goals. How do I feel now thinking this new thought? Usually people feel a little bit better, a little bit more peace, a little bit more relaxed, less anxious. If they're a spiritual person, the next question is for them. It says, is there a scripture that goes with this new way of thinking? So if they can tie their new thought to scripture, that can be a reinforcer. If you're dealing with somebody who's not a Christian and they're open to spiritual things, you could say something like, you know, this kind of reminds me of a scripture, and throw one out there for them just to kind of plant a seed, see if that's something that they're interested in. Next section, making actions match beliefs. What can I plan to do that will go with my new way of thinking? So this is where we translate the cognitive into the behavioral. So cognitive shifts alone are not enough. They have to become behavioral at some point. At this point, if it's, you know, a big leap for the person, this new cognition, it's not going to feel true. They're going to say, I know it's true, but it doesn't feel true. So what they need to do is figure out what actions go with the new cognition, and then to go do those actions. And the hope is that God meets them there, they have an experience of truth, and that connects them emotionally to the truth. Okay? And when you're coming up with these new behaviors, you want to make the plan cosmic. Remember, controllable, obtainable, simple, measurable, immediate, and consistent. So like a bad goal would be something like, I want my husband to be a better person, or I want my children to love me more. Like, that's not in your control. You know, I will ask my spouse out on a date is a much more cosmic goal, a better goal, because it's something that you're in control of. Not in control of the result, but you're at least in control of asking for the date. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Step 5, backup plan. If that doesn't work out, what is my backup plan? So if the new thought is something like I'm worthy, or I can do hard things, or whatever, and they go out and they try to put that into action, but it fails, it doesn't mean that that new thought is true. Could be lots of reasons why their plan fails. So you want them to have a backup plan, a plan B, okay, a contingency plan, so that if plan A doesn't work, they got to fall back, okay? And then step 6, provide details of how working through these steps helps. So you want them to record what the results were of this little experiment. They've created a new thought, they're creating new behaviors to go with it, and then here is a place where they can record the results, so in the future they can look back and remember how they made this shift, what the results were, and hopefully that's an encouragement for them as they face challenging situations in the future. Okay. So that is this worksheet, and this is what you're going to do in your next life care exercise, which I will explain to you in the next video. So I will see you then.